Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the latest economic results coming out from Russia. And the reason why this story is so important is because these aren't estimates from the IMF. They're not figures produced by Western intelligence or guesses from economists. These are the official Russian government numbers coming out from Moscow. The Kremlin has just confirmed that in the first 6 months of 2026, Russia has run a federal budget deficit of around 5.7 trillion rubles, which is approximately 74 billion US dollars. Now, if we just think about that for a moment, this isn't the deficit for the whole year. This is just the first 6 months of this year. And when you compare that to the previous 4 years, the picture becomes absolutely staggering. During the whole of 2022, which was when Russia first invaded Ukraine, it recorded a budget deficit of 47 billion US dollars. In 2023, the position improved slightly to a deficit of 40 billion. In 2024, it fell to 34 billion. However, in 2025, it jumped sharply to 72 billion. And now Russia has already exceeded the whole of last year's deficit in the first 6 months of 2026. Now, that is an extraordinary deterioration in Russia's finances. So in today's episode, I want to explain exactly what's going on, why this matters so much, why I think the situation is likely to get worse rather than better in the rest of this year, and why Russia may now be facing its biggest single financial challenge since the invasion of Ukraine started. But before we get into all of the details, if you're enjoying these videos and appreciate all the research and work that goes into them, and please give me a thumbs up and make sure that you've hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Also, if you've got a hype button available, then please give that a quick press as well, because that really helps me with the algorithm and helps this video get pushed to a wider audience and makes a big difference. So if you could do that, that would be fantastic. Now let's look at the numbers in a bit more detail. Russia has officially reported a federal budget deficit of 5.7 trillion rubles in the first half of this year, which, as I mentioned, is around about 74 billion US dollars. Now, the Russian government is still forecasting that the full year deficit will be 4.8 trillion rubles or $62 billion, which means that they're going to actually do better in the second half than they did in the first half. And that sounds strange because it's pretty unrealistic. Russia is effectively saying that despite already losing $74 billion in the first half of this year, it's now expecting the second half of the year to be dramatically better and to claw back a huge proportion of those losses. So the obvious question is, how is it going to do that? Where exactly is the miraculous turnaround going to come from? Because when you actually examine what's happening across the Russian economy, it becomes increasingly difficult to see where this improvement is going to originate from. So let's start with energy. For the last few months, we've been covering Ukraine's increasingly successful drone campaign targeting Russian energy infrastructure. We've seen attacks on refineries all across Russia. Production has been repeatedly interrupted. Storage facilities have been damaged. Fuel logistics have become increasingly complicated. Some facilities have been forced to suspend operations altogether while repairs take place. And this isn't simply a military story, it's an economic story. Oil and gas remain the single most important source of income for the Russian government. Every barrel that isn't refined, every litre of fuel that isn't exported, every shipment that's delayed means less revenue flowing back into the Kremlin. And that's becoming a serious problem. Russia has already imposed restrictions on gasoline exports. It's now gone significantly further by introducing export bans including diesel and jet fuel. And if we think about what all of that means, Russia is one of the world's largest energy exporters, yet it's now restricting export of some of its highest value petroleum products because it needs to protect domestic supplies. That means less export income, less foreign currency, less profit for energy companies, and ultimately less tax revenue for the Russian government. Exactly the opposite of what Russia needs if it's trying to reduce a rapidly expanding budget deficit. And the problems don't stop there. We've also seen increasing disruption to Russia's export logistics. Commercial shipping in and around the Sea of Azov has become increasingly difficult. Ukraine's drone campaign has created uncertainty for commercial operators, insurance premiums have increased dramatically, shipping companies have become more cautious, captains are understandably reluctant to sail into areas where infrastructure and vessels may come under attack. Ukraine doesn't necessarily have to destroy every single ship. Just creating uncertainty alone can significantly reduce trade. That means exports become slower, more expensive, less reliable. Again, none of this helps the government recovering its revenue. Then we have the sanctions. More than 4 years after the invasion of Ukraine started, the sanctions haven't disappeared. If anything, they're becoming broader and more sophisticated. Restrictions remain on banking, technology imports, shipping, insurance, industrial equipment, access to Western capital markets. Russia has undoubtedly adapted to many of those sanctions, but adapting doesn't mean it's cost-free. Every workaround costs money. Every alternative supply chain is more expensive. Every middleman takes a cut. Every additional transport route adds time and cost. And all of that reduces profitability. And lower profitability eventually feeds through into lower tax receipts. Now let's look at the spending side. Is Russia reducing its military expenditure? Well, the answer to that is no. If anything, the opposite is happening. Every drone that has to be intercepted costs money. Every missile launched costs more cash. Every damaged refinery has to be repaired. Every air defence system must be replaced. Recruitment bonuses continue to rise for the military. Soldiers have to be paid. Families of those killed or injured receive compensation. Military factories continue operating around the clock. All of that costs enormous amounts of money. So whilst revenues are coming under increasing pressure, spending remains exceptionally high. That's exactly how budget deficits spiral. And remember, this isn't me just speculating, these are Russia's own official figures. The Kremlin itself is acknowledging that in the first half of 2026, it's produced a deficit of $74 billion. Now here's the really interesting question. What exactly is going to improve over the next 6 months? Are refinery attacks from Ukraine suddenly going to stop? There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that. In fact, it's probably the opposite. There's going to be more of them. Are sanctions going to be lifted? Well, that's highly unlikely. Is Russia suddenly going to export dramatically more gasoline, diesel and jet fuel? Well, that doesn't look very likely given the fact that it's banned the export of all of those products at the moment. Will military spending suddenly collapse? Well, there's certainly no indication of that happening at any point in the near future. So where does the Russian government expect this improvement to come from? Because if the second half of 2026 looks the same as the first half, then Russia isn't going to hit its 62 billion forecast deficit. It's going to be something more like 150 billion. And that's obviously a lot more than Russia has seen at any point in any year since the war in Ukraine started. In fact, 150 billion is almost as much as Russia has lost in every one of the years cumulatively added together. So if the second half of 2026 mirrors the first half, then mathematically Russia is going to hit a loss that's more than all of the losses that they've had so far. And based on everything we're currently seeing, that looks like the most realistic outcome. In fact, arguably, it's going to be miraculous if Russia can continue doing as well as it did in the first half of this year. If we look at the trend, in 2022, Russia lost $47 billion. The following year, it reduced it to $40 billion. In 2024, it was down to $34 billion. So it looked like things were going in the right direction. However, in 2025, it reported a deficit of $72 billion, which was basically the same as 2023 and 2024 combined. And now, in the first half of this year, it's already at $74 billion. So that doesn't indicate any element of stabilization. The deficit is actually accelerating. The financial cost of the war is increasing, not decreasing. And once budget deficits begin accelerating like this, governments eventually have very few options. They can borrow more money to cover the cost, they can spend more of their reserves, or they can raise taxes or cut civilian spending, or maybe print some money and risk higher inflation. None of those options are painless from Russia's point of view. If you borrow more, then interest costs rise for the government. If you raise taxes, then businesses and households come under more pressure. If you cut spending, then public services and infrastructure suffers, and so does the economy in the long term. If you use your reserves, then your financial safety net becomes smaller, and Russia has been doing that over the past few years. If you print money, then that drives up inflation, which is going to cause lots of other problems in the economy as well. And whilst Russia still has significantly lower government debt than many Western countries, that's only a small part of the story. The direction of travel is what's important. The trend is clearly moving in the wrong direction for Russia. Costs are rising, revenues are under pressure, the war is continuing, Ukraine's attacks on Russian economic infrastructure are becoming more effective and more of them, export revenues are being squeezed, and the government's own figures suggest the financial burden is continuing to grow. So from my point of view, today's announcement isn't simply another budget update, it's confirmation from Russia itself that the economic cost of this war is continuing to escalate. The Kremlin is hoping the second half of this year will be dramatically better, but based on everything we're currently seeing, from refinery attacks to export restrictions to disruption around the Sea of Azov to continuing sanctions to rising military expenditure, it's becoming increasingly difficult to understand where that improvement is going to come from. And unless something changes significantly over the next few months, Russia could be heading towards its largest budget deficit since the war began, and in fact, possibly even in its history. So hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you did, then please give this video a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, welcome on board. Please hit that subscriber button. And if you've got the option of the hype, then please hit that hype button because it really does help this video with the algorithm. It'll put it out to a wider audience and hopefully increase the views and enable me to make more videos like this. I'd just like to say thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much for that support. It really does help to keep me going. I don't think I would have been going on YouTube this long without your support, so really do appreciate it. Thank you very much.